Hey, thanks so much for stopping by our poster. So, we are interested in how the brain is able to organize hierarchically structured information in the world around us. And a lot of past work in humans has kind of identified these cool gradients of sensitivity to different time scales at different parts of cortex and also in the hippocampus. But a lot of these paradigms for humans have relied on naturalistic stimuli. And so, what we're going to do is complement them by examining the learning process as human learners are exposed to sequential sequences that are structured at both a low level and a high level. And we're also doing some computational modeling work. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about our plans for a neuroimaging EEG experiment where we'll be able to kind of localize where these effects are in the brain. Okay, so how does this paradigm work? Basically, human learners are exposed to these sequences of images one at a time, and all they have to do, at least in this version, is to detect if it's a cool colored image like these guys or a warm colored image like these guys. So there are only 8 colored images that they ever see that are repeated over and over again. Now, what's critical to the design is that in addition to the colored images, there are these grayscaled images that will appear in between. So they'll get blocks where the grayscale image will be one specific image. And this image is known as the context image. There are 8 of them total. And what the context image does is it determines what the order is going to be for the colored pairs that you see in the block. So basically, depending on the identity of this first grayscale image, this purple funky dude might be followed by a blue guy, or it would be followed by this red guy. And so because that's contingent on the first image, which is the context image, it's sort of like it's composed of these triplets, and there's this contingency between the third image and the first image in each triplet. Okay, so that's what we're calling the low-level order. And depending on what the context image is, it'll be in one of 2 different orders. So there are 2 different order conditions. So you kind of have to learn the mapping specific to each context image. Okay, then we also have each block of context images broken into 2 halves. So the first half of the block, you're going to get these 2 triplets. So these 4 colored images will appear. And in the second half of the block, this other set of 4 images will appear. And again, depending on the identity of the context image, which set of images comes first is going to swap. Right. And so that we're calling the high level order assignment of the context images. And again, there are 2 different high level orders. So we have 2 low level orders and 2 high level orders. So 4 different conditions for each context image. All right. And what we do to assess learning implicitly as they're being exposed to these sequences is for 80% of the blocks, it'll follow the correct rules. But 10% of the time, for 10% of the blocks, we're going to violate the low-level order rule. So it'll be the opposite of what you'd expect from that context. And then the other 10% of the time, we're going to violate the high-level order rule. Okay, and that way we can see, like, are people slowing down or making more errors? So that's how we're detecting implicit measures of learning. We also, at the end, did a post-test where participants would be exposed to short sequences, and they'd have to choose which of 2 images would come next, given the sequence they just saw. And one of the 2 images would be contextually congruent, the other would be incongruent, and in that way we can separately probe their sensitivity to the low level and high level order information. Okay, so what do we find? So there was no sensitivity on our explicit post-test, so people were very bad at predicting which of the 2 images should come next given the context when you explicitly asked them to do that, and they had an equivalently good but but context violating alternative to choose from. So yeah, so that didn't pan out. But if you look at their implicit measures of learning, and again, this is after about exposure to about 20,000 different images. So they've been doing this for 4 different sessions. You'll see that that there's a general trend for their response times in the color detection task to decline from the first session, and accuracy to slightly increase from the first session. But it interacts with the violation type. Okay, so here, none. This black line shows the trend over 4 different experimental sessions. So yeah, session is the x-axis and log RT is the y-axis here. So when there's no violation type, things decline like normal, and it's pretty similar for the low and the high. But if you look in more detail and you look within subjects and subtract the log response time for the low and high level order condition, then you'll see that over time, people are responding to the images more slowly when it's in a violation block. And this reflects kind of learning of the structure. And so this was significant for the high level order and marginal for the low level order. And then looking at the accuracy, again, for the blocks where there's no violation, which is this black line, you'll see that as the session increases from 1 to 4, so 4 different quarters of the experiment, accuracy slightly increases. And yeah, but if you look at the low-level violation blocks, you start to get an effect where your accuracy decreases if the low-level order was messed up. So if the triplet was not what you expected. Right. And there wasn't much of an effect. There wasn't an effect of high-level order here. But yeah, there's a marginal effect of low-level order where you have more errors over time for those blocks compared to the blocks without a violation. There's at least some implicit sensitivity to both the high and low level order information. Granted, the low level order results are marginal, but in 4 other experiments I ran, it's pretty clear people are able to learn triplets if you push them. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm more excited about the fact that we got it to work for the high level order, because that is pretty tricky to get people to learn. Okay. We also did some modeling work, and what we did here was we took some multilayer recurrent neural networks. So there was either 1, 2, or 3 recurrent layers. We fixed the total number of recurrent units, so there was always 150 units for each of the 3 different models. And so it would either be 150 in one layer, or 75, 75, or 50, 50, 50. But we would stack them, or, stack them more or less. And then we trained them on predicting the upcoming image in a sequence that's very similar to this, except we added in a little bit more variability so that the model wouldn't just overfit to the data. So like the number of context images in between the triplets would vary. And the total number of triplets displayed, I think, would also vary a little bit. But yeah, so we trained them to predict the upcoming image. And as the models, as all 3 different models, the one with 1 layer, 2 layers, and 3 layers total, 3 recurrent layers total, they all get better at learning to predict the upcoming image. The 3-layer model learns more slowly than the other 2. But there might be an upshot to that, or a reason why it's learning more slowly, and that we'll talk about here. So after learning, we kind of looked at the network sensitivity to... After learning, we looked at the network sensitivity of the model in each of its 3 recurrent layers. So this is looking at the 3-layer model. So we took the activation pattern for the 3 different layers in response to the context cue images. And so the context cue images, there's the low level and high level order conditions. So, 4 of the context cue images will share a low level order assignment. 4 of them will share a high level order assignment, and 2 each will share both assignments. So that's how you can break down similarity, the similarity structure. And so what you find is if you correlate these low level and high level order templates to the pattern of responses in each layer, when you expose the network to the context images in isolation after learning, you'll see that you can take these Pearson correlations and compute them for 50 different model instances and plot them here. And you'll get this trend where, in layer 1, it's sensitive to both low and high level order somewhat. In layer 2, actually, there's a little spike in the low level order. And then in layer 3, there's a big spike in sensitivity to the high level order. And the low level order sensitivity goes down. And so this trade-off is really cool because it kind of recapitulates what we think would go on in the brain, and validates our initial prediction that this is the type of organization you would get in a deep neural network like the brain. And so now that we've shown that this pattern similarity analysis works in the model, we can then look to see if it works in the human brain once we collect that data. All right, but interestingly, we also ran the 1-layer and 2-layer versions of the model, and those versions did not show this pattern. And so it seems like you need sufficient network depth in order for you to get this spike in sensitivity to the high-level structure. Okay, so basically we've shown humans are showing some implicit sensitivity to the low and high level sequential structure after extended learning. And in our neural network modeling, we showed that networks that have sufficient depth will show this cool gradient where the deeper layers of the network that are further away from the input are more sensitive to the high level structure over time. And so, yeah, we're going to continue our behavioral piloting to further improve learning of the low and high level structure in human participants. We're also going to do some model comparison between our LSTM model and some other existing sequential learning models like the HAT model. And also we'll be collecting some fMRI and EEG data from our human participants once we have the behavioral paradigm down. So the EEG will be used to measure learning implicitly of the low and high level structure. And the fMRI will be used to conduct a pattern similarity analysis both before and after learning to see how to kind of localize different parts of the brain, including the hippocampus and regions in cortex that are sensitive to the low level and high level structure. And eventually we're going to be looking at auditory sequence data as well. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it.